Hey YouTube, it's my last video of the day because I need to cook lunch. But what I wanted to do in this video is just talk real fast about some of the things that I wish I had known when I first started homeschooling. This is a video for folks that are just going to be getting into homeschooling and they're going to be homeschooling younger children. There are some things that I really wish I had a do-over for because I know it would have made our life easier. And then also some things that I did that I think really helped us with my kids. One of the things that I think is phenomenally important, and I encourage everybody who's just starting out with teaching their younger children, and I'm talking about kids 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. Start with letter identification. Start with lowercase letters. This is something that is it's standard practice in Montessori, but almost every other thing you'll see, everything from Scholastic to Leapfrog to everything else you'll see, they always kind of teach kids uppercase letters first. Teach your children lowercase letters first. The reason is because about 80% of all words that they're going to read are going to have lowercase letters in them. We only capitalize for proper nouns and beginning of sentences and things like that. So, we use so few uppercase letters, and yet we teach kids the uppercase letters first a lot of times. Definitely teach your kids lowercase letters first. And then teach them, when you teach them their uppercase letters, teach them alongside the lowercase letters. Sometimes we'll have the uppercase letters and then we'll have a different thing with the lowercase letters, and some confusion can come into that. Another thing that I really encourage people to do with younger kids is to start, when you first start teaching your children how to write, teach cursive at that time. The reason is because cursive, it has a more natural flow for the hand for children. And another big reason why I really like cursive early is because it is almost impossible to reverse letters in cursive. Whereas in print is very easy to reverse. Cursive, much, much harder to reverse cursive. So that cuts out on a lot of reversals. Another thing that I would encourage people to do is when you teach your children sounds of letters, teach them all the sounds. For instance, a lot of times when people are teaching the letter A, they'll say A says A and A says ah. Well, A actually makes more sounds than that. A makes 4 different sounds. We say Y says yeah. Okay, that one really, really ticks me off because the vast majority of time Y is making the I or the E sound in writing, and we go Y says yeah, and then we we'll show kids a word and we'll say MY, that's my. Really? BY, that's by. BABY, that's baby. What? I thought you said Y said yeah. Okay, teach them all the sounds. Even for S, we'll say S says S. Okay, like snake. Okay, that's great, but S also says Z, like Z, like when you say shoes. Teaching kids all the phonetic sounds and let them know that each letter makes a lot of sounds. I would also encourage people to start teaching letter blends much earlier. A lot of times people want to wait to teach letter blends, but I think if we introduce kids early to the fact that T and H, when they're apart, they have their own sound, but when T and H are together, they make the th sound. It's not t, it's th. And so if we, and C and H, they have their own sound when they're apart, but when they're together, they make the ch sound. And S and H have their own sound when they're apart, but when they're together, they make the sh sound. I think teaching that really early, I think kids can get that, and it makes the reading process go so much easier because they're gonna, whenever they start to read, they're going to start to read those blends and stuff. And I think just teaching them, early on that, When, just like, when, there's a man, there's a woman, but when they get married, they become one, become this partner, they become this family. That's the same thing with T and H. When they're apart, that's great, but when they come together, they make this whole new family, this whole new sound. Another thing that I would teach or encourage people to teach younger children is, again, giving shout out to Yas, Love is Enough, for really bringing this to the forefront, but definitely want to reiterate acknowledging zero early, and not having children start counting at 1, but having children start counting at 0. Even when your child is young, even when they're 3 and they start to count to 10, start them at 0. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and not starting at 1, because when you acknowledge that 0, that makes addition and subtraction, multiplication, that makes everything so much easier to understand by starting to count with 0 instead of starting to count at 1. So that's another thing that I would encourage people with young children to do. Another thing that I would encourage people with young children to do is really concentrate on fine motor skills. I think that when a lot of times I see a lot of people post and they say, well, or especially on homeschooling websites, people will say, well, what curriculum should I get my child? My child is 4 and I'm ready for my child to start learning. Fine motor skills are so much more important to develop in young children than reading. Like, all the time that you would try to spend getting your 3-year-old to read, there are some 3-year-olds that they're going to be early readers, and they're going to read at 3 no matter what you do. But if you don't have an early reader and you want to teach your child something, concentrate on teaching your children good fine motor skills and good fine motor control in the early years, because a lot of times people concentrate on trying to teach their child how to read or teach their child how to do addition or subtraction and all that other kind of stuff, and they'll neglect the fine motor skill development that should be taking place at that time. And then when their child gets into kindergarten, first grade age, and then they start having to write, and then you find out, not only is my child's pencil grip not right, but my child doesn't have the fine motor skills that they need to even grip the pencil, or my child is getting tired because they're not gripping the pencil right, or my child is struggling to learn how to tie their shoes because those fine motor skills aren't there. Developing those fine motor skills, that is much more important for a 3-year-old than learning the alphabet. The alphabet will come in time, but those fine motor skills are important. Another thing that I encourage people to do, that actually I did do, and I see the benefit in my kids, is that it's more important to read to your kids than it is to teach them how to read. When you teach them how to read, a lot of times what they're reading for themselves is at a much lower level than what they can understand. And so if you just concentrate on those early years for reading to your kids, and reading them good, interesting things, not just picture books, although picture books are great and you can find all sorts of levels of picture books, but reading your kids a vast amount of different books, all different kind of themes, science and math, and I think I showed you guys books that I have even on engineering, and like Iggy Peck, architect, and Rosie Revere, the engineer, and Roberto, the architect, all those different sort of books. And your child, reading those books to your child when they're 3 and 4, and then all of a sudden you have this 5-year-old who can talk to you about, the planets, or you have a 6-year-old who's interested in, biomedical engineering, and people go, how does that happen? Because you read to them and you open their eyes to this world. And so instead of, concentrating on making your child be an independent reader, or making your child do math independently, showing your child the wonders of addition and subtraction, and reading to your child about the what's going on in the world, and space and science and technology and all those things. I think that's so much more important. Another thing that we did that I think really paid off for us, and what we're seeing come to fruition in my children right now, is letting them do science experiments, even if they didn't know what was going on, even if it was just for the fun, the flash, the bang, the spills, the zips, the dips, all that kind of stuff. It was absolutely worth it, and I would definitely definitely do it again. I think that is just so important for kids to get in there and start getting messy and getting their hands dirty really early in the process. So I would definitely encourage people to it doesn't matter if they don't understand what's going on. Just let them go out there. Just let them mix vinegar and baking soda just because it's cool. Let them play with cornstarch and water and the goo and mess, even if they don't know why it's working or why what's happening is happening. Just let them play with it anyway, just because it's fun. And I think that all the bells and whistles and knowledge can come later. All the definitions and the reasons, what for and why, that can all come later. Just let them do. I think is really important, and something that we did that I think was very beneficial for our children. So that's the big advice that I would give people who are looking at homeschooling younger children. Another thing, socialization. Don't fall into that trap. 3-year-olds, like, I'm not saying that 3-year-olds can't have friends. They can. I'm saying that 3-year-olds don't need friends. Your 3-year-olds don't need friends. That's a myth. And 3-year-olds don't learn how to act from other 3-year-olds. So a lot of people say, well, I want to socialize. I want to make sure my child has socialization so they'll know how to act in the world. You want your child to learn how to be nice, kind, truthful, honest, caring, empathetic from another 3-year-old? You want them to learn how to be respectful or resourceful or diplomatic from other 5-year-olds on the playground? Really? No. Kids don't learn how to act by, they don't learn that from other kids. What happens when you have children teaching other children is Lord of the Flies. We learned a lot from that book. So again, I'm not saying that children don't need to play. Of course they need to play. They just don't need a best friend at 3 years old, and they're not going to die if they don't have a scheduled play date every week. Really, and also one of the things that I think is important is kids, it's good to learn how to entertain yourself as well. It's good to learn that alone doesn't have to be lonely. And we often buy our kids things that they can play with by themselves, even though they have siblings. I mean, my twins, I had kids in sets, a pair. So they always have somebody that's around that's the same age as them. And my oldest is less than 2 years older than his siblings. So it's not like my kids are it's not like they don't have built-in playmates, but I still encourage them to go play by themselves sometimes. Read a book, entertain yourself. Just yourself. And that's something that you can learn to have fun with you at 5 years old, at 6 years old, at 7 years old. So I encourage people to not get too caught up in socialization of young children, because you will set a precedent where, I know people where, if they're not at the park or they're not at a play date or they're not at a field trip, their child isn't happy because they got them addicted to being around other people so young that the child associates having fun with being around other people. And then sometimes that's just not possible. And so, yes, it's important to be around other people, but friends, I don't have a lot of friends, but that doesn't mean my life isn't full and interesting and exciting. It still is. And I want that for my kids as well. I want my kids' joy, peace, and happiness to come from within and not from without. Even though I have kids that are extroverts, so even if they get their energy from being around other people, it is not pertinent to their joy that they be around other people. So those are the big advice cues I would give to other folks who are looking at just starting to homeschool younger children. And I hope that helps. My parting advice is don't get discouraged when you make wrong turns, and don't get discouraged if you have bad days. We all have bad days. All of our bad days might look different, but we all have days that we wish would have gone differently, and that's just the way it works in the world. So keep your head up. It's all gonna be good. You're doing amazing. You're gonna do fine. Your kids are gonna do fine. Okay. So hope that helps. This is Dr. J.